The Trump administration on the offensive tonight after taking a hit today. A federal judge has given the impeachment inquiry a legal endorsement.
While the Justice Department has launched a criminal investigation into why the Russia probe started.
KCAL 9's Jeff Nguyen is here, has details for us. Jeff?
Well, Jeff and Sharon, the White House is dealing with a major blow tonight, and this comes after a federal judge ruled today the impeachment inquiry is legitimate. On top of that, the court decided that Congress should have access to previously sealed material from the Mueller investigation.
I had a perfect conversation with the president of Ukraine. Perfect.
As the snowball effect of the impeachment inquiry grows, CBS News has learned attorneys for former National Security Advisor John Bolton are talking with lawmakers about possibly cooperating.
Okay, so imagine you're watching the news, checking your social media feed, and suddenly everything explodes. Federal judge delivers stunning ruling against Trump. New evidence revealed, criminal contempt findings. Congress moving toward impeachment within hours. And you're thinking, wait, what just happened? How do we go from court proceedings to impeachment talk this fast? Well, let me tell you, this is massive. This is a federal judge not just ruling against Trump, but essentially handing Congress a roadmap for impeachment, laying out findings of contempt, obstruction, violations of congressional subpoenas, making it clear that Trump's conduct crosses the line from questionable to criminal. And Congress is acting on it immediately. Democrats and even some Republicans are drafting impeachment articles, talking about removal, discussing accountability measures, all triggered by what this judge revealed. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
He wasn't getting along with people in the administration that I consider very important.
Other witnesses have testified Bolton was concerned about the efforts to press Ukraine to investigate the president's political rivals. Sources also say regular impeachment strategy meetings have been held in the Situation Room. And the White House is looking to beef up its impeachment communications team.
I don't have teams. Everyone's talking about teams. I'm the team. I did nothing wrong.
But the Trump administration is also going on the offensive.
This is November 2025. And we're watching a constitutional crisis unfold in real time. A federal judge has issued an order that goes beyond typical judicial rulings. It's not just about one case or one violation. The judge laid out a pattern of conduct, repeated contempt of court, obstruction of justice, defiance of congressional subpoenas. And the judge didn't just document this conduct. The judge signaled readiness for immediate penalties, arrest orders, expanded investigations, criminal charges. This is a judge saying, enough is enough. This conduct cannot continue. And if the executive branch won't hold Trump accountable, then the judicial branch will force the issue. And Congress is watching this and saying, actually, we have a role here too. And that role is impeachment. The ruling came down on a Thursday. And by Friday morning, impeachment papers were being drafted on Capitol Hill. That's how fast this is moving. Congressional leaders saw the judge's findings and realized they had the legal ammunition they needed. Because impeachment is a political process, but is strengthened when there's clear legal evidence of wrongdoing. And this judge just provided that evidence. Detailed findings about Trump's conduct, documentation of violations, clear statements that this behavior crosses legal and constitutional lines. Congress can take that and say, look, this isn't partisan politics. This is a federal judge confirming that the president has engaged in impeachable conduct, and that makes the impeachment case much stronger. Let's talk about what the judge actually found, because this wasn't vague or ambiguous. The judge made specific findings. Trump is in criminal contempt for repeatedly defying court orders. He's obstructed justice by refusing to comply with congressional subpoenas. He's violated constitutional requirements by ignoring legitimate oversight demands. The judge went through the evidence methodically, showed a pattern of defiance, demonstrated that Trump's legal arguments were inadequate and in some cases frivolous. And then the judge dropped the hammer, said this conduct warrants immediate penalties, including possible arrest. That's extraordinary. Federal judges don't talk about arresting sitting presidents lightly, but this judge looked at the evidence and the pattern of behavior and said, this has gone too far. Consequences are necessary. And the new evidence the judge revealed, that's what's really driving the impeachment push. Because the ruling included references to evidence that hadn't been public before. Communications showing Trump directly ordering officials to defy subpoenas. Documents proving he knew his actions were violating the law. Testimony from witnesses who described Trump's involvement in obstruction schemes. This isn't speculation. This is evidence presented in court, examined by a judge, and found to be credible and damning. And once that evidence is in the public record through a court ruling, Congress can use it, can cite it in impeachment articles, can point to a federal judge's findings as independent validation of their case. The scope of the impeachment being discussed is unprecedented. We're not just talking about impeaching Trump. Congressional leaders are talking about impeaching top administration officials too. The articles being drafted include multiple counts: contempt of Congress, obstruction of justice, constitutional violations, abuse of office. Some members are even discussing violations of the emoluments clause, the constitutional provision that prohibits presidents from profiting from their office. This is comprehensive. This is Congress saying, we're not just addressing one incident or one violation. We're addressing a pattern of constitutional abuse that affects multiple areas of government and multiple officials. The speed of congressional action is stunning. Normally, impeachment is a slow process: investigations, hearings, deliberation, but this is moving at light speed because the judge's ruling provided ready-made evidence. Congress doesn't have to spend months investigating and gathering documents. The judge already did that work, already examined the evidence, already made findings. Congress can take those findings, incorporate them into articles of impeachment, and move forward immediately. And that's exactly what's happening. Committees are meeting in emergency sessions. Articles are being drafted. Votes are being scheduled. This could go from judge's ruling to impeachment vote in a matter of weeks rather than months. The political dynamics are shifting. In previous impeachment efforts, Republicans have been solidly behind Trump, but this time, some are wavering because a federal judge's findings carry weight. It's one thing to dismiss partisan accusations from Democratic members of Congress. It's another thing to dismiss a federal judge who's examined evidence under oath and made legal findings of misconduct. Some Republicans are privately saying they can't defend contempt of court and obstruction of justice when a judge has documented it. They're looking for ways to distance themselves without directly opposing Trump. But the pressure is mounting, and if impeachment comes to a vote, the calculus might be different this time. The media and public reaction has been intense. This is dominating every news cycle. Social media is exploding with takes on the ruling and the impeachment push. Protesters are gathering at the Capitol, some demanding impeachment and removal, others defending Trump and claiming this is persecution. The country is divided, and that division is playing out loudly and publicly. But the fact that a federal judge has made these findings gives the impeachment effort a legitimacy it might not otherwise have. This isn't just political theater. This is legal accountability intersecting with constitutional processes, and that combination is powerful. This is the story. A federal judge revealing stunning findings that Trump has engaged in criminal contempt and obstruction. Congress responding with the fastest impeachment push in history. Multiple articles being drafted targeting Trump and his top officials. A constitutional crisis unfolding as the judicial and legislative branches move to hold the executive accountable. And we're going to break down exactly what the judge ruled, what evidence was revealed, what the impeachment articles say, and whether this has any chance of actually resulting in removal. Because this is historic. This is democracy's checks and balances being tested in real time. Let's get into it. All right, so let's dig into what this federal judge actually ruled and why it's causing such an earthquake in Washington. Because to understand why Congress is moving so fast on impeachment, you need to understand what the judge found and how damning those findings are. This wasn't a routine procedural ruling. This was a comprehensive order that addressed Trump's conduct across multiple cases and multiple types of violations. And the judge didn't pull any punches. The language was direct, the findings were specific, and the implications were severe. The case before the judge involved congressional subpoenas that Trump had ignored. Congress had issued legitimate subpoenas demanding documents and testimony as part of their oversight investigations. Trump refused to comply. His lawyers argued that the subpoenas were invalid, that executive privilege protected him, that Congress was overstepping its authority, standard arguments that have been used before. But the judge wasn't buying it. The judge went through each argument methodically and rejected them all, said the subpoenas were valid and within Congress's constitutional authority, said executive privilege doesn't apply to potential criminal conduct, said Trump's refusal to comply constituted contempt of Congress, and then the judge went further, said this contempt wasn't just a civil matter, but potentially criminal, that Trump's willful defiance of legal obligations crossed into criminal territory. But the judge didn't stop there. The ruling also addressed Trump's conduct in other pending cases, his refusal to comply with court orders, his attempts to intimidate witnesses, his public statements that seemed designed to obstruct investigations. The judge compiled all of this into a pattern, showed that this wasn't isolated incidents, but systematic obstruction. And the judge made a finding that's crucial for the impeachment push. The judge said Trump's conduct demonstrates a fundamental disrespect for the rule of law, that he believes he's above legal accountability, that he's willing to defy courts, Congress, and constitutional obligations to protect himself. That finding is gold for impeachment advocates because it goes to fitness for office. It's not just about one crime or one violation. It's about whether someone with such contempt for legal authority should hold the highest office in the land. The new evidence revealed in the ruling is what really set Congress on fire, because some of this evidence hadn't been public before. The judge's order included references to sealed materials that were being unsealed as part of the ruling, communications between Trump and his advisors discussing how to defy subpoenas, emails where Trump's team debated whether they could get away with ignoring court orders, testimony from former administration officials describing meetings where Trump explicitly ordered defiance of legal demands. This is direct evidence of obstruction, not circumstantial, not inferential, direct documentation of Trump knowingly violating legal obligations. One particularly damaging piece of evidence involves a conversation Trump had with his legal team. According to the judge's ruling, Trump was told explicitly that refusing to comply with congressional subpoenas would constitute contempt, that it was illegal, that there would be consequences. And Trump's response, documented in notes taken by someone present at the meeting, was essentially that he didn't care, that Congress couldn't enforce their subpoenas, that he would fight it and delay, and by the time courts ruled, it wouldn't matter. That's consciousness of guilt. That's someone knowing they're breaking the law and doing it anyway. And a federal judge just made that evidence part of the public record. The judge also addressed Trump's public statements, because Trump has been tweeting and making statements attacking judges, attacking Congress, attacking the legitimacy of investigations. And the judge said these statements constitute witness intimidation and obstruction, that they're designed to chill cooperation with investigations, that they create a hostile environment that undermines the legal process. And the judge cited specific examples, tweets where Trump attacked witnesses by name, statements where he implied consequences for people who cooperated with investigators. The judge compiled all of this and said this is obstruction of justice. This is using the power of the presidency to interfere with legal proceedings, and that's impeachable conduct. The judge's signal about immediate penalties sent shockwaves through Washington because judges typically build up to enforcement actions gradually. They warn, they fine, they escalate slowly, but this judge indicated readiness for immediate serious consequences. The order mentioned the possibility of arrest, of criminal charges beyond contempt, of expanding the investigation to include Trump's associates who helped him obstruct. That's the judge saying, I'm done with warnings. If this conduct continues, there will be severe and immediate consequences. And that gives Congress political cover, because they can point to a judge saying arrest might be necessary and argue that impeachment and removal is the appropriate response from the legislative branch. Congressional response was swift and coordinated. Within hours of the ruling being released, Democratic leadership held a press conference. They announced that impeachment articles were being drafted, that committees would meet in emergency session to review the judge's findings, that they were prepared to move quickly because the evidence was clear and the conduct was ongoing. They framed this not as a partisan exercise, but as a constitutional necessity. They cited the judge's findings repeatedly, said this was about the rule of law and whether a president could simply ignore legal obligations without consequences. The articles of impeachment being drafted are comprehensive. The first article addresses contempt of Congress. It cites the judge's findings that Trump willfully defied valid congressional subpoenas, that he instructed others to do the same, that he showed contempt for Congress's constitutional oversight role. This article is straightforward. The evidence is clear. A federal judge has already made findings on it. It's arguably the strongest of the articles. The second article addresses obstruction of justice. This goes beyond just the congressional subpoenas. It includes Trump's efforts to interfere with the special counsel investigation, his attempts to influence witnesses, his public statements designed to intimidate. The judge's ruling provided significant evidence for this article. And obstruction of justice is a crime that's been the basis for impeachment before, is well-established grounds for removal. The third article addresses abuse of power. This is broader. It includes using the office for personal benefit, pressuring foreign leaders to investigate political rivals, using government resources for personal legal defense, profiting from the presidency in violation of the emoluments clause. This article is more complex because it involves multiple types of conduct, but the judge's ruling about Trump's contempt for legal constraints provides context. It shows a pattern of behavior where Trump believes the rules don't apply to him. The fourth article, which is still being debated, would address obstruction of Congress. This is related to, but distinct from, the contempt charge. It focuses on Trump's systematic efforts to prevent congressional oversight, ordering officials not to testify, blocking access to documents, claiming blanket executive privilege over everything. The judge's ruling documented this pattern, and Congress is arguing that this obstruction makes it impossible for them to fulfill their constitutional role, that it's not just about one investigation, but about preserving the balance of powers. Some members of Congress are also pushing to include Trump's top officials in the impeachment: the Attorney General for refusing to enforce congressional subpoenas, the White House Chief of Staff for coordinating the obstruction, others who actively participated in defying legal obligations. This would be unprecedented, multiple impeachments at once, but the argument is that the obstruction was so systematic that it required multiple people working together, and if those people are still in office, they pose an ongoing threat to constitutional governance. The political dynamics in Congress are complex. Democrats are largely united behind impeachment. The judge's ruling gave them the ammunition they needed, but they need Republican support to actually remove Trump from office. Impeachment requires a simple majority in the House. That's achievable with just Democrats, but removal requires a 2/3 vote in the Senate. That means significant Republican defection, and that's where the judge's ruling becomes crucial, because Republicans who might be unwilling to vote for removal based on partisan accusations from Democrats have a harder time dismissing a federal judge's findings. The judge is a neutral arbiter who examined evidence under oath and made legal conclusions. That carries weight. Some Republicans are quietly signaling they might vote for impeachment, not publicly yet, but in private conversations, they're expressing concern about Trump's contempt for legal authority, about the pattern of obstruction, about whether defending him is worth the political cost. The judge's ruling gives them cover. They can say, I'm not voting against the president politically. I'm upholding the rule of law based on the federal judge's findings. That's an easier vote to justify back home than a purely political impeachment. The timeline for impeachment is compressed. Normally, the process takes months. Investigations, hearings, deliberation. But Congress is talking about moving this in weeks because the evidence is already compiled. The judge did the investigative work. The findings are clear. Congress can hold abbreviated hearings, focus specifically on the judge's ruling and whether it justifies impeachment. They can call the judge to testify about the findings. They can bring in constitutional scholars to discuss whether this conduct meets the impeachment standard of high crimes and misdemeanors. But they don't need a months-long investigation. The foundation is already there. The White House response has been defiant. Trump is calling this a witch hunt, claiming the judge is biased, arguing that impeachment is a partisan attack. But that defense is weaker when a federal judge has made specific findings of criminal contempt and obstruction. The White House is also trying to rally Republicans, pressuring them not to vote for impeachment, warning about political consequences. But the pressure is working both ways, because defending conduct that a federal judge has declared criminal is politically risky too. Public opinion is divided but shifting. Most Americans have already made up their minds about Trump, but the judge's ruling is affecting persuadable voters, people who aren't intensely partisan, but who care about rule of law. Seeing a federal judge make findings of criminal contempt and obstruction matters to them. It provides independent validation that this isn't just political theater, and polling is showing slight movement towards supporting impeachment, particularly among independents. That movement could affect how Republican members vote. International reaction is significant too. America's allies are watching this closely. A constitutional crisis involving potential impeachment of a sitting president affects how other countries view American stability. But it also demonstrates that American institutions are functioning, that checks and balances are real, that even the president can be held accountable when courts and Congress work together. That's the message being sent globally, and it matters for America's credibility on issues of democracy and rule of law. Okay, let's break down what this all means and what's likely to happen next, because this is complex, it's moving fast, and the implications are enormous. Point 1. The judge's ruling provides legal foundation for impeachment. Congress doesn't need a judge's permission to impeach. Impeachment is a political process that Congress controls, but having a federal judge make findings of criminal contempt and obstruction gives the impeachment effort legitimacy and bipartisan appeal. Republicans who might resist purely political impeachment have a harder time dismissing a judge's legal conclusions. The ruling transforms impeachment from a partisan exercise into a response to documented legal violations. That's significant. It changes the political calculus for members who are on the fence. Point 2. This is the fastest impeachment process in modern history. From judge's ruling to drafted articles in less than 48 hours, that's unprecedented. But it's possible because the judge did the investigative work, the evidence is compiled, the findings are made. Congress just has to decide whether those findings justify impeachment, and many members believe they clearly do, so the process is compressed. Emergency committee meetings, abbreviated hearings, quick votes. This could go from ruling to impeachment vote in 2 to 3 weeks, maybe less. That's lightning speed for Congress. Point 3. The scope targeting multiple officials is unprecedented. We've never seen an impeachment effort that goes after the president and multiple top officials simultaneously. But the judge's ruling documented systematic obstruction that involved many people. If Congress believes that obstruction is ongoing and threatens constitutional governance, then removing just Trump might not be enough. They might need to remove everyone involved in the obstruction scheme. That would be constitutional chaos. Multiple cabinet positions vacant, succession issues, political turmoil. But Congress is arguing the alternative. Leaving obstructors in office is worse. Point 4. Senate conviction is still a long shot, but more possible now. Removing Trump requires 67 Senate votes. That means at least 17 Republicans will have to vote with Democrats. That's always been seen as nearly impossible, but the judge's ruling changes the equation slightly. It gives Republican senators a nonpartisan justification for voting to convict. They can say they're upholding a federal judge's findings rather than making a political choice. That might not get to 67 votes, but it might get closer than previous impeachment efforts did. And even if removal fails, the impeachment trial itself is politically damaging. So what happens next? The House will move quickly on impeachment. Articles will be finalized and brought to committee. Hearings will be held, probably featuring testimony from the judge or legal experts explaining the findings. The committee will vote to advance the articles to the full House, and the House will vote on impeachment, probably within a few weeks of the judge's ruling. The vote will likely succeed in the House. Democrats have the majority, and the judge's ruling gives them strong justification. Some Republicans might even join, not many, but perhaps enough to make it bipartisan. That would be significant. Previous impeachments of Trump were purely partisan. If this one gets any Republican support, it carries more weight. The Senate trial will be the real battle. If the House impeaches, the Senate must hold a trial. That trial will dominate Washington for weeks. Prosecutors from the House will present the case. Trump's lawyers will defend. Senators will hear evidence and deliberate. The judge's ruling will be central to the case. House prosecutors will cite it repeatedly, will argue that the Senate must uphold the findings of a federal judge, that failing to convict would send a message that presidents can ignore courts with impunity. Trump's defense will attack the judge's credibility, will argue bias, will claim the ruling was politically motivated. But that's a tough argument when the ruling is detailed and based on extensive evidence. The Senate vote will be dramatic. Even if Trump isn't removed, seeing how many Republicans vote to convict will be telling. If it's just 1 or 2, Trump survives politically, relatively unscathed. But if 10 or 15 Republicans vote to convict, even if it's not enough to remove him, that's devastating politically. It shows his party is fracturing, that Republicans are willing to go on record saying he committed impeachable offenses that damages him whether he's removed or not. If Trump is somehow removed, which is still unlikely but less impossible than before, the constitutional chaos would be immediate. Vice president becomes president. Cabinet has to be reorganized if multiple officials were also impeached and removed. The 2024 election dynamics change completely. Trump could still run again unless Congress also votes to bar him from future office, which only requires a simple majority after conviction. The political landscape would be transformed overnight. If Trump survives impeachment, he'll claim vindication. We'll say he was exonerated, that this was a witch hunt that failed, but that spin is harder with a federal judge's findings on the record. The legal violations don't go away just because the Senate didn't convict. The contempt finding stands, the obstruction finding stands, and Trump still faces potential criminal prosecution after he leaves office. Because the judge's ruling provides a roadmap for prosecutors, documents the evidence, makes legal conclusions that's valuable for any future criminal case, the political impact extends beyond Trump. This impeachment effort is a test of whether constitutional checks and balances can function against a president who refuses to accept them. If Trump defies courts and Congress with no consequences, it sets a terrible precedent for future presidents. But if he faces impeachment and possibly removal for that defiance, it reinforces that no president is above the law, that courts and Congress have real power to enforce constitutional obligations. That precedent matters for the health of American democracy. Look, what we're witnessing is a constitutional system under stress. A federal judge has documented serious legal violations by a sitting president. Congress is responding with the most serious remedy available, impeachment. The process is moving at unprecedented speed. The stakes are enormous, and the outcome is uncertain. But the fact that the system is functioning, that checks and balances are operating, that's significant. Because if these institutions couldn't respond to documented contempt and obstruction, then the Constitution would be just words on paper. Does Trump get removed? Probably not. The Senate math is still tough, but this impeachment is different. It's based on a federal judge's legal findings. It's moving faster, it's broader in scope, and it's got at least a chance of peeling off enough Republican support to be meaningful. Even if Trump survives, he's wounded. His claim to being persecuted is undercut by a judge's ruling. His political support is fracturing. His legal troubles are mounting. This is a turning point, regardless of the final vote. Stay tuned, because this is going to dominate American politics for the next several weeks at minimum. The House vote, the Senate trial, the political maneuvering, the public reaction, all of it will be intense and consequential. This is democracy in action. Messy, contentious, uncertain, but functioning. The system is being tested, and we're about to see if it holds.